We make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give. Welcome to the Guyana Dialogue. I am your host, Shamiza Ali. Our topic tonight is how political leaders engaging in the current election campaign could help to improve Guyana's work ethics. The Guyana Dialogue is being sponsored by a coordinating council of Guyanese based in the US, UK, Canada, Guyana, the Caribbean, and our funding support is by well known philanthropist Dave Narayan from Dave West Indian Imports. Please welcome my moderator for tonight, Dr. Tara Singh.
Thank you very much, Shamiza, and
Our,
welcome to our viewers.
our panelists tonight are Professor Muniram Budu and Dr. Gangarang Das.
Hello, Shamiza
Hello,
and Tara.
everyone. Hello, thank you, Shamiza.
Our guest tonight is the Indian rights activist. He is a former MP and social commentator. Please welcome Mr. Ravi Dev.
Thank you, Shamiza.
Welcome, everyone. Dr. Tara, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. First, let me apologize to our viewers. We had some technical issues at the beginning, and I believe we have resolved that now. So we want to say that we are sorry for that. Okay, today we're going to have a topic that is rarely discussed in the public domain in Guyana. We want to look very critically at people's attitude towards work and towards non-work as well. So with us we have one of Guyana's leading social commentator, analyst, lawyer, sociologist, whatever, everything combined, political activist in one. So I hope that he can shed some light on some of these very. You know that there has been a recent debate in Guyana about the number of vacancies available, but yet Guyanese are not there to fill it. Either they don't have the skill or they don't want to work or some other factor. In some cases, Guyanese business have to import labor from overseas. But before we go into that, I just want to ask our guests to render some comments on the recent developments in the political arena now that the AFC have gone back to the APNU PNC, ask them to now revive to continue the conversation arrangement in Guyana. So go ahead, Ravi.
Yeah,
Go
right
ahead.
now in Guyana, I am in Guyana, in my home village of Iflat. And right now the topic is dominating both the social media, the regular media, and the ordinary people in the streets, is what's going on with the opposition. The PPP, they have been there. They have declared 5 years ago of an encompassing program to include all Guyanese. And politically, the implications of that was that they wanted to build a broad coalition of actual people on the ground as they could, because obviously, because of our ethnically divided electorate, that might seem obvious, but it has not been so because of the way people normally behave. However, we have now, in the last 10 years, become a nation of minorities, meaning no one single ethnic group can command a majority at the polls. And therefore, it would seem logical for what the PPP is doing, which is to have a wider program as necessary. And they're doing it, and they've been rather successful. However, on the opposition side of the fence, even though they demonstrated the truth of the proposition that we are now a nation of minorities, whereby they stymied the PPP in 2011, won the elections in 2015, and then lost it in 2020, meaning that Guyana has now the politics of in and out. they seem to have lost the plot. That in a democracy, the purpose of elections are to agglomerate a wide cross section as you can to get that 50% plus one. And they have not been. They have been talking about coalitions. They have been negotiating forever about coalitions. But all we see is more fissioning than coalescing. And that's the irony in their camp. You mentioned the AFC. The AFC, for some reason that I can't fathom, felt that they could demand a majority of whatever seats a coalition of the PNC and the AFC would get. Everyone before that thought the PNC was very generous to have given them 40% back in 2020. They went above that, and the PNC dug their heels in, denied that, and they've been going back and forth, whittling down their percentage demands. But in the eyes of most people, they have destroyed the viability as a party, much less one that can command, a share of any coalition to demand it. They should have been pleading, in my estimation, to get onto the coattails of the PNC. And I think the attitude that was adopted has really backfired on them. So we see, rather than the AFC coalescing with the PNC, that Aubrey Norton of the PNC has now gone into the bosom of the AFC and stolen some of their brightest stars. So we see now that Juritha Fernandes of the AFC being declared the candidate, the prime minister candidate of the PNC. Then you see Sherrod Duncan also stepping over, a very noted AFC figure. So what we see there is, again, the collapse of the grandiose expectations of the AFC. I see it going nowhere, and you have a PNC that is now trying to regroup. And I use the word regroup advisedly, because with what was been going back and forth, some of the top tier leaders of the PNC has decamped because, again, of what was going on within the PNC in not recognizing the need for a cross-ethnic appeal. So you see that we had several individuals, Geeta Chandan Edmund, stepping over into the PPP, and we see that continue, and I think it will. So what we see is a very fluid situation, the latest being Walton Desir, now stepping out of the PNC because her hopes of some big position in any future government was shattered when Juritha Fernandes got that nod to be the prime ministerial candidate, and she has walked out now and has launched her own party. So we see a very fluid situation here, Dr. Singh. But basically what it is that you have an opposition that is floundering to become relevant, and they have really shot themselves in the foot repeatedly.
So,
Dr. Farah?
Go ahead.
No, next, are we moving on to another panelist, or?
You're moving what? No, I just want to ask a quick question to Mr. Day. Do you think if AFC, they always insist they will run independently, you think if they run independently 2 or 3 seats?
So the way they have now
get
structured
one.
it, they have to run independently. I don't see any coalition. There's no need. The PNC, through Aubrey Norton, has now shown they have absolutely no need for the AFC. The AFC at this juncture brings nothing to the coalition. The AFC has now made themselves a replica of the WPA that might have been big and bad at one time, but is right now electorally irrelevant. Because you see, what is happening here, let us say, talk about the traditional ethnic vote, where the PNC traditionally agglomerated both the African votes and the mixed votes, the colored votes. AFC reached out across through Mr. Trotman for that colored vote, and my friend, and I use the word very seriously, I considered him a friend, Nigel Hughes, felt he could adopt that mantle to as a member, as a card carrying member of that colored elite to bring in those votes. But right now, that elite is also a very calculating elite. And if it now, Norton will now play the trump card that they cannot afford to quote unquote split the vote. They cannot afford to split the vote. And that is a very powerful argument when no one group to begin with has a majority. So in a sense, you're now splitting a minority section, which will guarantee you that, as we say in Guyana, you will lose corn and lose husk. So coming back to your direct question, I don't think the AFC might even they might garner one seat across the country because of our peculiar PR across the country, where all your votes, 2 votes from Region 8 and 5 votes from Region 3, and all the votes, it comes together, and you may get somehow squeeze in a single vote. That's what I predict for them. They've made themselves irrelevant, especially, and this is the point, Tara, in all of the negotiation details that are now coming out, and they're disputing it, so all the dirt is coming out. They have been focused on power, how much power they will get, how much MPs they will get, what boards they will get. We're not talking about the development of Guyana in any new systematic way that the electorate could say, you know what, we have a bunch of people who are going to be different. No, they're just focused on divvying up something that they didn't have, which is power. And you see, the ordinary Guyanese simply see that as them wanting to get their hands on the consolidated funds. Because you have a very, very, very cynical but realistic electorate, because that's all the AFC did in their first turn at the wheel, where they gave in to every insult and downsizing of Mr. Granger just to be able to say they were a minister, as in the case of Moses, just to say he had 12 outriders and flashing lights as he went back to his home village at whim, and that sort of dirty, disgusting political overreach. That's what they've demonstrated. I don't see them getting anywhere.
Okay, the only reason why I say that is because in the local government elections in 2023, they didn't win any local authority area.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, now quickly, I'm going to ask you the last question before we move on to Professor Boudou and Dr. Ramdas. Now, the labor situation in Guyana, can you give a quick overview of the labor situation, and then the panelists will go into specifics about attitudes towards work, etc.?
Well, in terms of labor, one of the major problems those of us who are looking at the situation face is that there haven't been any hard figures that have come out in terms of statistics of hard data to let you get your teeth into what is actually going on out there. We're using data that are sometimes a decade old, sometimes more than a decade old. So in terms of unemployment, and I want to consider that to look at that term, I believe the last one that came out was in 2017, which is 8 years ago.
Yep.
And you have they claimed that the unemployment was about 12%, meaning 12%. And this, we have to be very, very, very careful, because in the normal colloquial, people feel you're unemployed when you just ain't working. But it's not that. Unemployment is defined in these reports as people who are looking for work and can't get work. That's the bottom line. Let us always remember that. It's not how many people are not working, it's how many people are looking for work and not getting work. Well, in my estimation, I support the bold statement by Komal Singh, who was the former head of the private sector commission, who said there is no unemployment in Guyana. And I am telling you, living in IFLUS here, I can get somebody to fix my roof that's leaking because of the heavy rain and squalls that now buffet us. I can even get somebody to clean the front of my yard. The bottom line in Guyana is that you cannot get anyone to even do menial labor, which is you can now have to pay if you want maybe 40 US dollars, about $8,000 Guyana or so. So the people who are filling those jobs are mostly Venezuelans or Brazilians. There's a house that the house next to mine, just next door, 10 feet away, was bought by someone, broke it down, and for a year now has been trying to get a new one constructed. The post went up, and that was it for a year. Couldn't get labor. Finally, I saw sand was delivered again, some blocks were delivered again, and I spoke to the guy. I said, "Man, I'm hopefully that these new Venezuelan people he's gotten will be able to finish the job." The the IFLUT Mandir over by the public road near a bridge next to my house is being rebuilt. They have only been reduced to finding labor from the Venezuelan workforce. You can get, and here in IFLUT, there are people out there not working. There are young men out there not working. There are young women out there not working. But yet only the Venezuelans will take a job. And this is not just minimum labor. I'll close with one staggering figure that Paul Chung, the CEO of Gaisuko, revealed a statistic which is remarkable to say that the champion cane cutter was earning over $32,000 per day for cutting cane. So if you had an unemployment sector, the sugar industry can get labor in general and cane cutters in particular. But look at the wage you could earn by just, as we say, cutting cane. I don't know this word, harvesting cane. I'm from IFLUT, and we call it cane cutting, and you can get that. So come back again. It's a long-winded answer, but the bottom line is in Guyana, they are the people who want to look for work is guaranteed employment if they want to work.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Professor Budu?
Hi, Ravi. Good to see you again.
Oh, my old school teacher back in the day. Yes, sir.
Yes. Dr. Singh started with politics, and I'm going to stay there for the first question. Right? What do you believe are the three top issues for further growth in Guyana, and which political party is best to address these issues?
Well, we can talk about what ought to be the issues and what are the issues, and they're two different things. I was taught, throughout my schooling, that it's nonsensical to deal with what might be or what is what ought to be. You can't ever determine what ought to be. You have to start from where you are. You have to start from where you are. And this also has direct relationship to the topic that you fellows have chosen, which is how can the work ethic be improved? And the chief topic in Guyana today, Professor Budu, should be how can the entire nation participate in this huge burgeoning of the economy. That is not theoretical. It's there in every sector. There's money being spent. Gaisuko, they complain that billions are being spent and you're not seeing the profitability yet. But I just put my finger that even though you can earn $32,000 a day in Gaisuko, you are not getting workers. How can Gaisuko really prosper if you can get workers? Machines don't really produce sugar and certainly don't produce cane. You need people in those fields, and the people are not going there. So that ought to be one of the main subjects on the agenda. But what is the main subject on the agenda? What is the main subject on the agenda today? It's again race. This constant beating of the racial drumbeat. For example, the PNC coalesced with the WPA. The WPA, to be very frank, with whom I was closest to when I came back to Guyana for over a decade, 30 years ago, has dwindled into 5 old men muttering away in a corner, invoking the name of Dr. Walter Rodney, who was the multiracial politician par excellence. They have now degenerated into a most racist cabal. So the PNC, in coalescing with them, they have now made the main topic race. Everything race, race, race. And we have seen that right now, take for example the gold scholarships, which this education is universally seen as the major stepping stone towards getting out of poverty, wherever you are. The gold program has demonstratively shown that there are more non-Indians enrolled in the program than not. So rather than now addressing those non-Indian, if that is their constituency, graduates of gold, to get them into the economy, they are preaching a kind of negative, nihilistic ideology, which in a sense convince those people, no, you can't get ahead. If you keep on telling somebody they can't do it, there's all these systemic barriers, there are racial barriers, there's this barriers, then those people only see that. So to me, come back to your question, Professor Buru, the major issue should be, how can we get every Guyanese out there to develop themselves? And a lot of the preparatory work has been done in terms of education, in terms of creation of new infrastructures. And I think the major issue that politicians should jump on, not in a theoretical sense, but in a real one. Get your people lined up and get them positioned for in my work. We call it 3 Ps, not PPP. I am not a member of the PPP, never have been. The 3P mean you first pick up people, then you pin up people, meaning you pick them up, you identify them, and you place them, whether in a job or to move up, and then you push them when you're there, right? Pick up, pin up, push up. Those are the 3 steps, and you push your people to excel further. The opposition is doing nothing of that. So to my great dissatisfaction, I come from Iflat. I always boast about that. I come from a mixed village. I come from that section where the Africans were dominant, and it pitied me that how badly led they are. Now, one of the issues, not to diverge, but to just coalesce in it, is showing that this is why some of the PNC people are leaving. Right in my village, there's a young girl out of my village who is the niece of James McAllister of the PNC, a blue blood PNC family. She has left the PNC as a young lawyer, a young professional, joined the PPP, and is pushing several programs within IFLAT in that section where jobs can be created and they can move on. So that ought to be the major issue, and I am praying that they will see some sense in what I'm saying.
Yeah, let's take this issue further a bit, because you're identifying work ethic as a major contributing factor for Guyana's long-term development. And I want your response specifically regards to government services. Because
So,
these
specific reference to
government services.
okay,
Yeah, because these services are critical for the everyday lives of Guyanese, and they are frustrated with the persistent corruption, inconsistent standards, and lethargy, I will say, that exists and have existed over decades. I think that the solution lies in e-government and e-governance. I wrote about this in a local newspaper and brought these up with the PM on this show. I had the opportunity to see how effective and efficient these services are in Estonia, Denmark, and Singapore. These are the leading countries in these areas. In Estonia, for example, 99% of all public services are accessible online. You can go there on your phone and within a couple minutes get a birth certificate. What do you think about it?
well, Professor, you're speaking to the converted. At each stage of development, successful governments, if they're logical, would adopt the latest technology, apply it, and that's how you get progress. So when you had donkey carts or horse carts pulling people, when you had the steam engine invented, the steam engine was adopted in almost every industry, including ours in Guyana here, where it displaced windmills and water mills to grind cane, and sugar itself progressed, or in any field. So and so on and so forth, you can take it. So right now, as you're pointing out, the whole transmission and utilization and application of data has now progressed to a point where that in itself creates the efficiencies and takes it to a whole new level. And any government that wants to develop must adopt it. That is my bottom line. And I think that is yours also. And we have seen the countries that you call Estonia and all that, they were not there, but they now took the leap and, in a sense, leapfrogged the stages of development. You know, there's this normal thing, Rostow back in the 60s talk about the stages of development. Now we see you can leapfrog it. And right here and now. So right here in Guyana, I have 5G. Right? Now, how do we utilize that 5G? My mother-in-law, who now lives with me, right? Her husband passed. And she now is, when she wants the news, she goes on her smartphone in her late 80s. And she utilizes it and communicates with her daughters in the States and what have you. Now, we can apply that in running the country. A perfect example is my returning to Guyana. I was up in New York. I went to London 2 weeks ago, came back, went to New York, had to travel, not that many jet setter like Shamisa is. She's our Ocean View girl, jet setter. I'm merely, traveling for health reasons. But the point is, though, that in going to England, they have their e-form that you just fill out online. So when I got into England, I merely presented my passport, zipped through. Similarly, however, when I will return from New York to Guyana and from London to Guyana, Guyana government now has that. You fill out your e-form right there. And when I went to CGIA, I merely slapped my passport with the picture face down, and the doors opened up, and there I was outside. So it's an example of how efficient it is, because and I know, and everybody knows the frustration that greeted us at that airport as Guyanese, and imagine how foreigners saw it. It is very debilitating and demotivating. So the fact that you could zip out of CGIA in 5 minutes is a tremendous improvement. Now, with that, I had to spend 3 hours to get from the airport to my home in Iflat because of the roads. But even the roads, that's because they're widening the roads into 4 lanes, because the 2 lanes just can't take the traffic. And in doing so, you have to do some legwork. So to come back to it, yes, I see that the government has done so. President Irfan Ali has robustly adopted the whole need to digitize, to computerize, to move us into where that technology is taking us. And I think he has not only the willpower, but he has the necessary enthusiasm to be able to accomplish this. Because you have to be in any change is always traumatic. But in this one here, I know he's a true believer, and you need somebody like that to really push this thing along.
I have a last question before I pass you on to Dr. Ramdas. I noticed that you specifically did not list poverty elimination in your top 3 issues. Dr. Tara Singh, our moderator, wrote extensively on poverty in Guyana. In a recent article, he actually cites World Bank statement education levels appear to have the strongest association with poverty status. Personally, I believe that poverty elimination reduction consists of a matrix of factors, not simply education. Education is one of them. In the context of Guyana, from my own experience, culture is important. Strong, cohesive family unit with a mission to get out of poverty and a sense of responsibility for your own livelihood rather than shifting it to the government. And a mindset to work rather to collect handouts are important factors. I think government should provide opportunities for advancement, but it is responsible for the person to make use of these opportunities. What is your take on this?
Well, here again, Dr. Boudou, you are speaking again to the converted, and I've been conducting this for over 30 years. That poverty, how do you address poverty? And that you have certain leaders who has created a mindset that you can get out of poverty. When we know, and we can start, we don't have to go too far back. My own family came out of the lodges of Iflat, right? I can tell you, I can pinpoint where Shamisa's grandfather came out from one of those sections of Iflat, Mr. Ishmael, Uncle Ishmael. And how did they rise up of that lodgy environment to then move upwards, right? How they did it, and this is the bottom line, to seize whatever opportunity that could be discerned to make your living and to then exploit that. You do not sit down and wail about systemic barriers. That in itself creates a mentality that will hold you back. It's, as you said, it all goes into what's in your head. And we saw that right here in Iflat. And I can speak for all of the people that I literally grew up with. So my father, who worked on the sugar estate, was a mere security guard with a minimal salary. But my brothers and my mother and all that, right in Ocean View here, they had a kitchen garden. They tended ducks and chickens and turkeys, and they went to the seawall at Zeeburg, and we call it specking. When the fishermen brought in their catch, they would separate the shrimp from the small fish. So meaning you did whatever it takes to move ahead, and then you took the opportunity that both parents said very clearly none of their children would enter that back dam. And they accomplished it by whatever means necessary. So they sent us to school. And again, just like we have now, at that time, there were 2 schools, free government schools opening at Zeeburg and at Zeelat. And I attended one of them. And you got your education, and then you move upwards. So coming back to the situation in Guyana, Doctor, I again believe that you have put your finger on the critical element of culture. That the whole notion of moving up, they're putting it that East Indians get up And the most extreme one was recently revealed. So ridiculous that we now sacrifice humans, that we commit human sacrifice to get rich. And you had a reporter, a Guyanese reporter in the Associated Press was willing to write that trash. But people believe it. Believe it, it's amazing that how we got rich was because of the esoteric rituals, which even brought in human sacrifice. That's how you get it. Not that you would do whatever it takes without complaining. You see what it is here, and this is when I came back to Guyana. I exposed some research that was done by Professor Donald Horowitz that included the Caribbean as one of the plural societies where there were differing mentalities. You had one set of people, especially in our Caribbean, Afro-Guyanese, who has when in all societies you have something called group comparison. So when groups compare themselves, and inevitably they will, just like human beings do. Shamiza goes to the latest ball. When she walks into that ballroom, people compare themselves to her. You get me? Similarly, socially. So in Guyana, the social comparison process between Africans and Indians, the Africans always feel the Indians are doing better. But that's not the process, that's something you see. But it's the reason why. So rather than following Dr. Rodney's advice in his book, that Indians work harder, that his mother told him when he went to Queens, you better study harder because those people are studying. The competition was there. So you just got to be as good or better if you want to remove. But no, this lot, especially from the WPA, they have come up with a theory that African Guyanese, because having quote unquote suffered more during slavery, 200 years later, has a greater legitimacy to the national patrimony. Let me repeat that. The WPA and their ideologues have now joined up with the PNC, and this is their mindset that they want to push to their people, that they have a greater legitimacy to the national patrimony. And how should they get that legitimacy, that patrimony? It should be given to them. Handouts, not hand up, that they should be pulled up through education or through jobs opening or what have you. Not hand up, hand out. And in my estimation, based on the experience, not only here, worldwide, be it Mauritius, be it Malaysia, any other plural society, the groups that works the hardest progresses the fastest. Bottom line. And you look at it, the Chinese are still doing well in Malaysia, even though they're discriminated against. The Indians are still doing good in Mauritius, which is now first world, and so on and so forth. And unfortunately, in Guyana, as those who work harder and hardest progress, the social comparison process will make fingers be pointed at them. You know what? The PPP is helping them. You take my own Ocean View here. I can tell you every home in Ocean View has been improved. And did the PPP give anybody anything to that? No, if anybody gave anything, it was people from New York who sent back remittances to them if you want to talk about help. But no, people work hard. It comes back to what's in your mind. And I think the leaders in the Afro-Guyanese community are not only not helping their constituency or their perceived constituency, they are actually harming them in telling them that, listen, even if you try, you can't make it. Because that's what David Hines and that lot is doing. Even if you try, you can't make it. So therefore, why even bother to try? Fortunately, young people, I have 2 young professionals in my family, and with their friends who are multiracial as you can get. The younger Afro-Guyanese are not taking that, and they are trying to seize the opportunities. So I believe change is coming.
Dr. Tara, we'll take a quick break at this point. I will come back with the next questions. right, we are back. Please go ahead with your questions.
Dr. Randas?
Dr.
Okay.
Ganga?
Nice to see you, Mr. Ravi Dev. This is about the third time we're dealing face to face. The first time was on the streets of New York.
That's right. That's right.
Very
Many moons
impressed.
ago.
Yes. Now I'm looking at the work ethic, and I have put it in succinct terms. There are opportunities and choices through real jobs and apprenticeships. So our leadership should look in that direction. It's no longer the case where you can put an ad out in the newspaper and get a flood of applicants. You might get a handful, but you have to be prepared to train those people. So there is the market forces where you exchange wages for labor, and then there are non-market forces where you have opportunities through training, apprenticeships, and also the inculcation of your early life. So there is the early opportunity at the village level where you got your experience, no different from in the United States where you encourage kids to open a lemonade stand on the sidewalk. But we at the village level learned not only from by ourselves in our family farms, but our parents worked at the factory. So they had a certain discipline and motivation to go out there and work. So the environment in which we lived, the early stages, and then of course later on we had the post high school, and then there were opportunities and choices. So those post high school were like civil service teaching, and then for a few others, police and army. But the bulk of our efforts that we exerted to get up came from self-employment, and that came through land ownership. I keep emphasizing people need land in order to be creative and to elevate themselves. Their hands and feet alone can't do it. They may have the appropriate education, but if they can't find the appropriate job in Guyana, they will go somewhere else. But to anchor our population, and so they develop creatively their work ethic. Land ownership is essential for family farms and so forth. Of course, the higher level, at the academic level, university, and then they outsource university education to Russia and Cuba and also to Canada. And then these days, you have private opportunity in the USA, and the doors are closing there. So the question is, how do you see the market versus the non-market forces providing the impetus to develop work ethic across the country? Market versus non-market. Market is wages for labor, and then you have a whole multitude of cultural and not so these days, not so much the historical factors which you alluded to. So can you comment on those?
Let's take the market forces right away, because coming from a sugar estate, IFLAT, growing up here, uh, going back all the way to the 50s, we had the introduction of the Port Morant Apprentice Training School, which goes back, which Lord Parker, not Lord Parker, Lord Campbell, Jock Campbell had patterned from the mining, influence in out in England. There, they had the same pattern of having an apprentice training course, where those apprentices would then go back to work with journeymen, and then rise up into to take over. You call it the Guyanization. And I must say that was one of the most successful innovations in Guyana. And, two of my brothers were Booker apprentices, and they took the very best of the country boys. You had to pass an exam to get in, and The government now has seen fit that even though it's continuing with sugar, and that continues, it has now had an addendum where the oil and gas field, you have apprentices for that right next door, right in Port Morant. So that shows you that the government is serious, and that should be expanded. The oil majors themselves have programs where they are sending individuals out into the states. I haven't seen CNOC doing anything yet. They might have; it might have escaped me. But for sure, I know Exxon and Hess have sent people out to the states and in Canada to get some training. So these institutions, they are learning from history, and they're continuing to train their workers. On its own now, the government has at least tripled in the high schools the number of technical programs in their high schools, the number of dedicated institutions. There's one at Leonora, there's one at Maikoni, there's one at New Amsterdam, there's one up in Anna Regina, where you have VOTEC, vocational technical subject, being taught. You have that. So that is a process that is continuing and should bear fruit. But you come back to the other section that you talked about. What is going on in society? Because when I was a boy, to become a book apprentice was valued. You knew you would get up. But what has happened since the Burnham days, where it didn't matter what you qualified yourself in, you weren't going to get the job. I remember returning to Guyana, and my youngest brother, who was a very bright boy at Zeeburg High School, I said, "Man, do your A levels, in Georgetown." And he said, "What am I going to do A level for? There's no jobs." And Shamisa might remember him; they're about around the same age group. So the point is, though, I persuaded him, and he is now a vice president of J.P. Morgan Chase. Having security for an institution that has $3 trillion worth of assets. And he would not have gone on to high school because of the no jobs being available. So during those years, we have to understand, I don't want to go too far back to slavery, but I'm going back right up to 1992. And then you had the lag, right? Hysteresis, economists call it, that lag in performance, where the PPP had to get rid of that $2 billion debt that the PNC bequeathed. So in that time, during that time, you couldn't get the jobs that you wanted. And some of that motivation was lost. So right now, what social workers, and that is for myself specifically, I work, there are many like me who are working at the grassroots level. I work among Hindu youths, and you try to show them now, just like I showed my brother back in the day, that man, go on, there are now jobs available, and you can then go on to it. I think much more of that is needed to get the boys, especially at the village level. Right here in Ocean View, a lot of boys just hang out. They're not motivated. So I've spoke, for example, to Mandir people, the Masjid people, and those institutions now have to reorient some of their programs to address exactly what you point out, that those institutions always intend to develop their people, and you have to develop yourself materially and otherwise, and that is part of their mandate to do. So the work is needed in both those areas, Dr. Ramdas, and I see it happening, but it needs to be increased. Coming back to the opportunity in terms of land and all that, I was very excited by President Ali's recent announcement, because 20 years ago, as part of ROAR program, we felt that the land of Gaisuko, which is one of the few land that is drained and irrigated in the world to such an extent, that those should be passed on to the workers, leased or in some other way, and the workers should then begin to use them. And we know 15-acre plots are very doable according to all the studies, farming, and we can have value-added farming, And I was very interested in Dr. Ali's recent announcement that he plans on diversifying Gaisuko into other crops, and that part of that diversification will be to put much of the assets into the hands of the workers themselves. When Granger had shuttered the estates, that started to, and they didn't shutter Iflot, they left it, but they shuttered Wales, which is on my part of the country. I contacted one of the sugar producers in Maharashtra, one of the Deshmukhs. They own about 9 sugar mills. Now, the model that Maharashtra used for sugarcane is that the sugarcane is cultivated by individuals at the family level. And then there's a corporation that supplies fertilizers, that handles transportation, all the logistical things that another corporation independently does. And the mills are owned. In fact, in this case, the Deshmukhs own 9 mills, as I said. And I had suggested that too, rather than just closing the estates, I arranged to have a meeting through Granger. He put me in touch with his son-in-law, who was the commerce minister, and the agriculture minister holder, who had never touched a rice field or a cane field in his life. And we had a meeting. And you could see these people were not interested in empowering people, even though I showed them. I took Nigel Hughes with me. Like I said, he's my friend. I took him along with me to show them, because the Hughes have family in the Wales area there. You have the largest group of private cane farmers in the Wales area there. And they would have been uplifted if their acreage could be expanded to supply cane to Wales Estate, which the Deshmukhs would have taken over, and they were willing to invest with that. And they were going to take the sugar to India, which has a huge market there. They didn't. So again, we're starting from scratch, Professor. But I am hopeful that the present government, and I'm not a member of that party, much less the government, is going to learn from these examples. And it's up to all of us to light a fire under them. Coming back to something we didn't talk about, which is the corruption, it's there. Jagdeo has confessed that it is there. And in any new economy that is exploding at the level at which ours is to be expected, you'll be a fool to say there's no corruption. It's just that systems have to be put in the way to kind of head them off. One of the things we suggested, what Lee Kuan Yew did in Singapore, which is anybody who could show that the assets of one of these workers, whether in government or not, is out of whack with their income, the burden of proof shifts to the individual. Show me where you got the money from. You got me? You have to now prove that you didn't steal that money. Show me where you got it. We should enact some sort of a law, because I know for a fact there are ministers right now whose assets right now are out of whack with their ministers' salaries. And the government got to get serious about that, because it's going to hurt them in the long run. People know, people see. It's a small country, and people will talk, and they're going to lose votes.
Yeah, you have given some really very valuable advice to the last government, and you're hinting it to our present government. I was very impressed with President Ali's desire to diversify the sugar plantations. And you mentioned land, that's critical. The Canadian optimum for non-grain crops is 15 acres.
15 acres. Yeah.
So what we have right now, you have Gaisuko production, and then you have private cane farmers, but there are only about 6 of them, and in all 4 estates. So that has to change, because if we're going to go through diversification, we have to reallocate the land to bona fide farmers and those who want to work, because that's where the work ethic develops. We looked at our parents going to the field and factories and how their work ethic evolved. And if people have their own land and farms to look after, to care for, they're going to develop the work ethic. It's happening in the Trinidad. I've seen that. It's happened in Guyana around Diamond Estate where I grew up. So people had high work work ethics and expectation. So I hope that what you mentioned with the high school opportunities in technical institute type of training, that government do not see it as an opportunity for the brain drain, but as a genuine way to mobilize the workforce. Because in the past, that's how what the attitude was. If we train them, they're going to go abroad. But the doors abroad are closing, and we need to keep our people back home. And the way, as you pointed out, to anchor them is through land ownership. So I would like you to just emphasize it once more, especially when you mentioned apprenticeship at Port Morat, and combine that with scholarships. Scholarship, my sister got this scholarship, and I had to accompany her to Georgetown to keep an eye on her. That's how I get tongue school education at Indian Education Trust College. So those are important opportunities for people to develop and make choices as they move up. So just give your, I suppose, in your closing remark, you can cover that. But thank you very much. You have touched on, you have stolen my thunder, but we're ad idem on these matters because I think we came from the sugar roots, from Diamond, from Diamond, you from iFlock. We have the same mindset there. Thank you very much.
Well, I grew up with my nanny. I was sent to Ifot Pasture to live with my nanny and nana. And my nanny worked in the sugar estate. My nana worked in the sugar estate. My nanny went from the age of 6 in the Creole gang. And I, as a boy, 50 years later, accompanied her. And, I would go play, eat cane, pick ban karela, which I still love today, ban karela and shrimp. With dal and rice is one of the best dishes you could have. So but I literally, joking aside, it's not a joke. The work ethic, and it wasn't only the work ethic. I want to put to the converse of that, because after she retired at the age of 60, which you have to in Gaisuko, we had a 2-acre farm that my great grandfather had bought at De Willem. So we would walk along the railway line to De Willem, where we had that farm, and we would plant whatever thing you thought about, all the vegetables and corn and whatever you thought about. We farmed, and that's where I learned my early commerce. I became a big executive in Manhattan, mid-Manhattan, 40th and Broadway. But it was grounded in me starting to sell and buy fruits and vegetables at our village market right in the front of Ocean View, near the community center there. But the lesson I learned from my nanny, who the authority would say she was illiterate and not numerate, but she could count her money. This lady had all her coins in a little kaili, and you can't trick her. She would count. She went back to count in what you call bit and bit and a half, 12 cents, the Dutch term bit. 2 bits, 3 bits, bit and a half, which is a bit and a half. And she could count. But apart from manipulating it, it was her ethos. And she taught me literally that if you work $1, if you work for $1, you never spend $1. You always spend less. And her estimation was the most 80 cents. So it meant that whatever you earned, you economists have fancy terms like deferred gratification and all the fancy things. She didn't know about deferred gratification. All she knew, you have to ban your belly and you don't spend everything and you put aside something. So this old lady had her money put aside under her bed between some old clothes. She put it aside there. So any one of my brothers, when they wanted to write exam, while the parents might have been too poor to pay for those exams, she could pay for that. Whether you want to go to Indians, as I did in 69, 72 A-levels, when I couldn't get through to Queens, they refused me. So the point is, though, that it was that whole notion of deferred gratification and using your money to make investments. That was taught by this lady that was so-called illiterate. And I go back to this whole notion of illiteracy and land. In the 1930s, Clem Sisharan writes about Jagdeo of Maikoni, who bought in the first tractor to plant rice in Guyana, who had over 3,000 acres of land in Maikoni Creek back then, who built his own canal to take water, an engineering feat that nobody thought could be done. And he built his own rice mill there. And he had his own boat made where he could bring out the paddy to the coast. And even though the government had launched a government rice mill, it failed. And old man Jagdeo did it. And you know what? Jagdeo was said to be illiterate and he could not vote, because in those days, you had to be able to read and write to vote. So a man who couldn't read and write, just like Nani or my Nana, they were able to accomplish beyond what anybody thought we had. The old Jagdeo family, they're still out in Maikoni. You could see them, 3,000 acres in those days, right? So come back to the whole thing about culture. I get very, very emotional about this because on a personal note, I remember this old lady, you get me, who would come, and Shamisa would remember the people, the Budus at Front Street when white chicken come in. She would buy 4 ounces of chicken, quarter pound, because all she got was $2 a week pension after working for 55 years. $2, the grand sum of $2 they gave her for pension. But within that, she sent me to high school. You get me? By planting that garden, by taking and selling the little vegetables she had. And when she took home that 4 ounce, that quarter pound of chicken, she would make that chicken curry and give it all to me. She said, man, I'm not hungry, bye. I'm not hungry. That is what our people are all about. That is what our people. And those who want to be envious of us and put us down and riot against us until they inculcate those values, they ain't going nowhere. And I am not embarrassed. I am rather proud of trying to pass on that heritage.
Wow.
Okay, Dr. Tara. Over to you, Dr.
Professor
Tara.
Guru,
Oh,
go ahead.
well, I know we got a very limited time. So I'm going to ask a few questions, Ravi, and I want you to give me short answers on them, right? You have worked in Guyana, in North America, so do all of us. We know hard work, ethics, professionalism, productivity, commitment to efficient and quality service. Do you think that the Guyana government should develop initiatives, for example, that integrate diaspora experience or say global best practices to help strengthen local work culture?
Absolutely. There's no question about that. We would be very foolish to do that. 25 years ago, I proposed that to do what Lee Kuan Yew did and what the present Chinese government, and China has really copied from Lee Kuan Yew. Small nation like Singapore taught the big China, 1.4 billion people. And that you have to use the expertise of your diaspora and you bring them back. And in Lee Kuan Yew case, he took them from the level of technology they were at, gave them companies to run and make them push on. That's one thing he did to bring them up, because they're going to be used to a higher level of remuneration. But what he did, he started these companies, put them in the hands of these fellows who he brought back from the diaspora, even some he sent out to study. And then he ensured that they had profit sharing, the ESOP, employee stock ownership plan. That should be basic. So you can be remunerated based on what you yourself put in. I think that's one. So I again, I'm a believer of that. India is presently doing that. India is trying to parlay its diaspora to use its skills. And again, like I said, you'll be foolish not to be able to not to tap into that, because in a sense you have people who are patriotic, but you see you have sadly you have a situation where there's some residual resentment about those of us who went abroad and did well. I have not literally worked at a job for 35 years, because I retired at the age of 37. I did well. You could buy buildings, which I did. You could buy supermarkets. You could have, my ex-wife now has a nursing home. You could do well. And you could use that to live very, very comfortable, have vacations in England and Scotland. So come back to it. I really push that idea and I support you. I know you want me to be quick. Yes, I support that. And the government, I know, want to do it. I don't know how they're going about it. But on a personal level, I was once asked by Irfan Ali before he was president on how they could do that. So I assume they're also working there, and I would encourage them to continue.
Just the last one then. You are an Indo-Guyanese right activist. When the PNC and its various incarnation and cohorts lost fair and free elections, they resorted to violence, and the data shows that Indo-Guyanese were invariably the victims. What should the government and the Indo-Guyanese community do in preparation for the outcome of the next election?
Well, like I said, sadly, this social comparison process is being used by the present activists in the WPA to show that them get it and the PPP is giving them, the whole thing that's being beaten to death. So I fully expect that resentment will spill over, especially when you concatenate that kind of blame game with claims of rigging going to happen. So suddenly, the dead will rise up, and the New Yorkers will somehow vote telephonically, and on all of that. So there will be tremendous resentment against the PPP that wins. I predict they'll win. I'm not, like I said, I'm not even support of them, but they're doing the smart political thing. So I predict that most likely there will be some level of violence that it always spill over. And again, I was pleased in the last 2 days, if you read the papers, that the government has begun to brief the armed forces and get them prepared to deal with these contingencies. Because now it's not just a contingency, it's almost a certainty that will happen. And I see the government making moves. And while the police, as we know, has become very corrupted because they live day in, day out, and has become very corrupted, everybody concedes that, including the government. I think we have seen that the army, to its credit, while Hoyt had called him their kith and kin, the army has held the line. And I think that can go as a credit to the training in America and in Britain that the officer corps is exposed to. So I hope they will hold the line. But yes, I do expect that there will be some, as Burnham used to put it, condign violence post-election.
Okay. Shamisa?
Thank you. Very inspiring, a very nostalgic evening with you, Mr. Dev. If I may add, I know you mentioned your brother went to Zeeburg. I actually attended IFLT Primary. I noticed someone made a comment about Professor Buru, I believe, taught at IFLT Primary. I attended IFLT Primary, went on to Zeeburg Secondary. And just like your brother, I worked for JP Morgan for many years. I had a long career, a very flourishing career with them, and I had the title of VP. So very proud of that. And coming from Ocean View, having you as someone who's well known for Ocean View, it means a lot. I had a 17-year career here in the US, worked in Manhattan for HSBC Bank, a huge career with banking, and I enjoy every moment of it. So thank you for that. We do have a question at this time. Mr. Lal is asking, will Mr. Ravi Dev consider returning to active politics?
Let me just make a categorical statement. I've been asked again and again by so many individuals in and out of politics, and the answer is no. I've reached an age where I think I can play a role as a quote-unquote elder statesman. I do have the experience, and I'm willing to share that experience, but I will not share it with those who are clearly, demonstratively using politics to rend us apart. I feel that we have to build a Guyana, and at long last, we don't have to beg anybody for money, and we cannot lose this opportunity. I do think we have a 30-year window of opportunity. As Martin Luther King says, I may not get there, but I have seen that promised land. And I would like us to at least do what we can now to reach that promised land where all Guyanese can live very, very comfortably and in dignity.
Well said. We will now ask you for your closing remarks.
Well, like I said, I always enjoy, whenever I come up to New York, uh, Tara and I, we meet and we have what I call an old time gaff. It's not like the rum shop gaff. It's a restaurant gaff now. We have moved on. We're both older folks now in our, later years. So we had a good gaff. But I feel very comfortable in coming on to this program because I happen to know all of you and we share that commonality. And I would like to feel that all Guyanese, when I left, I landed in New York in 1972 to go to Brooklyn College. But I had to pay my way. I worked at a site behind the World Trade Center where they were putting up some apartments out of the landfill that was created by excavating the cellar, the basement of the World Trade Center. And in that thing, there was an individual from Africa, from Nigeria. There was one from Pakistan. There was myself from Guyana, and there was a Trini, and there were some Black Americans. And I was able to, in a sense, almost being forced to locate who I am. And I found out that I was Guyanese. I shared so much in common with that Guyanese fellow who was from Buxton, who was from Buxton. His last name was Sam. I shared so much with that individual African from Trinidad. I shared so much with that Pakistani, of whom I share so much in culture, because we came out of an India that was not divided. I didn't see Pakistan versus India. We all came from that. So in that sense, though, my root, going back to what thing, we got to see ourselves and our commonality and work along that commonality. And I'm hoping that in this coming elections, within the next 3 months, we will see more of this being exemplified. I thank you for giving this opportunity to share my thoughts.
Always a pleasure, Mr. Dev. I do want to take this opportunity to thank our entire panel, Dr. Tara, Professor Muniram Budu, Dr. Gangaram Das. Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our viewers for taking the time to be here this evening. Until next time, I am your host, Shamiza Ali, and this is the Guyana Dialogue. Good evening, everyone.
Bye-bye. Good to see you, Ravi. Take care.
Yeah.